everyone, welcome to Camel Workshop. This is Varsha and I'll be your guide for today's autumn landscape painting. So let's look at the colors that we'll be using first. So the materials that we'll use is Camel Artist Canvas, that is 10 by 12. Then colors are sap green, quinacridone red, cadmium red, cobalt violet, Indian yellow, cadmium red, Hansa yellow light, titanium white and phthalo blue deep. So this is what we'll be painting today. You can see this is the background and this is the foreground. 3/4 of the area is covered by the background and remaining 1/4 is covered with the foreground. Take a little bit of water to mix the colors. Here we are going for a darker tone as we are doing the base. Divided the background and the foreground through a horizon line, and the colors that we are using for the base are sap green and phthalo blue. The ratio is 1:1. We want to make it dark, so that's why we are mixing phthalo blue to sap green. So simply mix both the colors and color the base. I am using a flat brush for the same. Here the background needs to be dark because when we add lighter tones on top of it, you can see how beautifully they are popping out. If the background is not dark enough, all our tree strokes and leaves will look flat. So always make sure the background is dark enough. That will add depth to your painting. Colors that I am using for the foreground are phthalo blue deep and cobalt violet hue. So here you can notice the reflection of the trees is falling over here. This is the water surface, and here the lines or the reflection that you see is vertical. So all the strokes of water that we do, that you need to do it vertically. So always before getting started, just observe your reference first. Look how the strokes are moving, in which direction the flow is, and try to replicate that. So here what I am doing is we are mixing phthalo blue and cobalt violet. Just 2 portion of phthalo and 1 portion of cobalt violet. Always wait for the base to dry, then only start with your next layer. So for the first layer, the color which we are using is cadmium red dark. So for the initial layers, I won't be using heavy paint. Like when you do final highlights, at that time you can take more pigment and make it thick. So it will give a nice texture effect. For the next layer, which is yellow, we are using Indian yellow hue. Here make sure when you are dabbing with yellow, your base color is perfectly dry, because yellow is a lighter pigment, and if your base is wet, then it will start merging with the base color. A lighter shade of red for our second layer. For the first layer we use cadmium red dark, and for the next layer I am using cadmium red medium. The number of strokes needs to be less compared to our first layer. For your second layer, you can use heavy pigment, so it will give a nice texture effect. This yellow is very light and we have to match the tone for our first layer. So what I'm doing is taking Hansa yellow light and just few drops of Indian yellow. So this is the pigment that we are getting, and we'll do a second layer with this. Yellow which I did is not quite visible, so again with the darker color I am giving in few dabs. If you are like not happy with the result that you are getting, you can always go back to the previous color, rework on it, and then add in the next layer. So here you can notice there are very few strokes of green. So for that we'll use sap green and mix it with lemon yellow, which is Hansa yellow light. So sap green is very dark. To make it light, we are mixing it with Hansa yellow light. Always to make your greens lighter, always mix lemon yellow or cadmium yellow to it to make it light. Here now we just have to add in few highlights. We'll wait for this to dry, and meanwhile we'll work on the foreground area. Here we'll start by painting the reflections. You can see the reflection, the red, wherever we have painted red trees you will see a red reflection, wherever we have painted yellow you will see a yellow reflection, and for here we'll be doing a green. So whenever you are adding reflection, use very little pigment on your paintbrush and flick your brush in downward direction. So we are mixing phthalo blue and cobalt violet, just adding a little bit of cadmium red to it to make it dark. Here the base layer is not dark enough, so by adding a new layer, mixing phthalo blue, cobalt violet and cadmium red, I am just making it dark. Also for the reflections, we'll go from dark to light. So first we'll use cadmium red dark and then cadmium red medium. As the base is wet, so it's getting merged with the blue. That's completely fine because it will give a nice merged effect. So when you're adding reflection, just give one or two strokes. Don't just constantly add in stroke on that. If you're constantly repeating and merging it with the base, then it won't be visible. So just flick it once or twice. Same thing we are repeating with yellow and green. Repeat the same process. If you lift any pigment on your paintbrush, again clean the brush, wipe off all the excess water that it holds, and then again with the damp brush, again start flicking it and try to merge the reflections. Now for the highlights. First we'll start with the red highlights. For that we are using cadmium red and mix a little bit of Indian yellow to make it light. The highlights will be very minimum. Just add in very few strokes with this color. Same 1:2 ratio, 2 portions of cadmium red and 1 portion of Indian yellow. Very few strokes of highlight. Don't cover the entire red portion, just dab in few highlights. Now for yellow lights, yellow highlights, again we'll add Hansa yellow light and a little bit of white, 1:1 ratio for yellow highlights. Here you can notice it appears to be more whitish, so add in more yellow to create a balance between the tones. can notice as we are adding the highlights, it's adding more realisticness and depth to the painting. The more layers that you add, more realistic your painting will look. Here we are done with yellow highlights. Again, if you want to go ahead for one more, you can do that, just taking in more white. It's completely up to you how detailed you want your painting to be. So you can keep on adding layers on top of layers. So to the same previous mix, here for one more layer of highlight, I have made it lighter by mixing more white and just giving in few dabs. Again, for the green highlights, to the same sap green, the previous mix, we are adding more of yellow to it and just giving in few green dabs, lighter green. Now we are adding in some water lines. For that, what we are using is white color. You can dilute it with little bit of blue. So majority of it is white and just a single drop of blue to it. Size 1 or maybe size 0. And you have to paint in horizontal strokes. Some yellow stroke. Again, highlighting some red reflection. Finally adding 2 small ducks, creating a dot, then adding a neck and the body. For this you can use heavy pigment, so it will give like a nice texture. And white mixed with cobalt blue, cobalt violet, we are adding in the duck reflection. So we are finished with the painting. Let me know if you have any questions. You can drop them in the comment box. You can tag us on Instagram. Do share your work with us. We would like to see your creations. So you can tag us on Instagram. The Instagram handles are kokuyo.camlin and my Instagram handle, which is magical palette. So thank you everyone. Also, once the painting is dry, let it dry completely and then you can use Camel Artist Spray Varnish to varnish the painting. It will protect the painting layer. You can go ahead and do like 2 to 3 layers of varnish on top of it. Before applying the varnish, the painting needs to be completely dry. You can wait for like a day or 2. Make sure it's dry completely because here we have used HD acrylics, so it takes a little longer to dry. Then you can use a spray varnish and apply 2 to 3 layers. So thank you everyone for joining in.